and myself.
You can see who's speaking, or it's up to you.
I can see. Yeah, I can see well enough. That they are.
Right.
So when you go around and take attendance, would you just pause for names, because we want to make sure we know everybody's names. This is sort of a newish group.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So we are recording and we are live streaming, so we're ready when you are, Randy.
Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. It's an exciting new year. I think for the Conservation Commission, we've got a lot of important work to do together, but it's also a year in which I feel that there's more energy and attention on the contributions that we bring and the service we bring to the town, like never before, I think. So I'm really excited to convene this group. And we will get to a part in our meeting when we'll sort of review members and leadership. But let's start off by just having Jamie go ahead and take attendance.
Sure, I'll start in person. Richard,
Here.
Maggie,
Here,
Randy,
here.
Emily. Here. And on Zoom, Rita,
Here.
Jessica,
Here.
Marla,
Here.
Pete.
Here.
Thank you. That is all of us for the evening. Then Karen is our council liaison on Zoom. Welcome, Karen.
And Autumn is here as planning director. We'll have some time with her today, and we have some guests in the room. You want to introduce yourselves?
Andrew Mackey, Executive Director of the Scarborough Land Trust.
Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road.
Debbie Gates.
Great to have you all. Anybody else online?
It does
looks
not
like
look that
no.
way.
Okay. Maybe even before we get into the rest of the agenda, just to note sort of the changing of the membership. So at the last town council meeting, they approved appointments to the committee and changes in the commission. So as I understand it, Jessica Sargent has moved from first alternate to full voting member. Welcome, Jessica. Dick has moved from second alternate to first alternate. And then we have a new member, Maggie Bishno, who is our second alternate member. And we also have heard from Noah Perlett that he has been appointed to the planning board. We're very excited about that. But because of his time and attention that it's going to take to serve on that board, as well as the Conservation Land Board, he's resigned his position from the Conservation Commission. So I know we shared our wishes via email, but I want to formally thank Noah for his service on this commission. It's been meaningful, and we look forward to certainly staying connected through his role in the Conservation Commission. So I'll do a land acknowledgement to say that I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware that this is land that is unceded, and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Waskawag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We have minutes. Thanks again, Jamie, for comprehensive minutes from our last meeting. Did anyone have any comments on those before we take a vote to approve them? Great.
We have a motion.
Yeah, I'll do my usual motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah. All right.
I'll second that.
All right, I will roll call. And I need to make sure, I need to know who I'm asking. Okay. Randy,
Yes.
Emily.
Here.
Yes.
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 Sorry.
Rita,
Yes.
Carla,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So today's agenda, we're going to be spending the bulk of our time with Autumn Spear, our new planning director. I keep saying new. At some point
I
that won't
know,
be true
I-
anymore, but we're really happy to have her on board on the staff, and we'll be spending some time talking about how the commission can support the town's deliberations on land use in Scarborough. We'll also do some report outs from our committees. Well, and then because this is a new year, we'll recommit to our goals and look at who wants to serve on which committees. And I hope that we all have some thoughts about that and can take some action items in between meetings by stepping up into leadership and commitments to these goals. We're going to revisit the election of a vice chair, and then we'll have updates as usual. And I believe that Karen especially will have some more news than usual from the town council is what I'm anticipating. So if we're all good, let's go ahead. So again, welcome, Autumn. You've been at a couple of our meetings already and have had a few discussions with us, and our last sort of interaction has been around the GMO update process. So I don't know if you have any updates on that piece, but really your purpose here is to help us navigate this. How does the Conservation Commission weigh in on land use decisions in the town of Scarborough?
Okay, thank you. As far as the GMO, we gathered input from everyone just to give you all an update. Thank you for your input to that process. We are meeting again with developers actually tomorrow, and then ongoing, probably in January, had a summary of all the findings for the different surveys and the different groups. There were some pretty consistent messages throughout, which I think is really positive. The town council is discussing their goals on the 14th. So I think some of that, even though it hasn't been published, if you will get included in those discussions. So I'm excited about that. As far as you all are concerned for conservation, I'm not sure. I didn't prepare a presentation. I just sort of wanted to have a conversation. The Conservation Commission has a few places of authority or input that are in our existing ordinances. And did you share those, Randy? Have y'all talked about that before?
Oh, no,
The
not,
couple of spots where,
yeah, I did not share it
Okay,
with the
okay.
commission, and my apologies, everyone. I think my focus was on this conservation guidelines for review of land development proposals and
Okay.
how that might have intersected, but please go
Okay.
through this.
well,
with us and-
I'll talk to you a little bit. There's a couple of places where the Conservation Commission is mentioned in our ordinances, and one of them is you're supposed to, with the assistance from the planning department, maintain a registry that lists the owners of land and the limited growth or very low density growth areas that are interested in transferring development rights. And so that is something that you're specifically tasked with doing for the ordinance. You're also mentioned whenever we do a conservation subdivision. So those are the subdivisions that smaller, normally they might have 1 acre to 2 acre lots, but they can go down in size if they conserve some land. We do have some concerns about that, about the way that's written currently. So we would probably want your input into that moving forward. But then there's also some review process where your input is needed for plan developments. And so plan developments are really, for lack of a better description, special zoning submittals, and they can be residential or commercial, but they include a master plan phase. And the planning department engages engineering. We have public works, parks when needed. We also have third-party peer reviewers. And so we have this development review committee that when we get a submittal, takes a look at those, and then they prepare comments, and then those go forward to the planning board. And so you all are supposed to be part of that development review committee when we have a master plan. come in through the development process. And my understanding is it's been a bit of a challenge for timing because of the way that the meetings work. And so that might not have always been put into practice. The planning board meets every 3 weeks, and so we have a pretty fast turnaround. And I did bring a schedule to give you all, so you just kind of get an idea. But
And I'll circulate this on an email to everyone who's not in the room with us.
sure, sorry about that. So we have this 3 week turnaround, and so we get development review comments pretty quickly, and then we take it to the planning board. And I think that may have been, sometimes even planning board meeting is tonight. So we have some that are the exact same schedule, they overlap. And then since we're on that 3 week process, there's not always time to get the projects in front of you all. So I think that's something we're trying to figure out. Maybe we can think about how we might address that. If you do want to be part of that review process, how we can get those comments, what method they need to come in. And then what your focus would be for those comments, what's your real, the things you're really looking at. Some projects, you know, it's commercial and it's 85% impervious and there's nothing and you're, okay, great, we're not concerned. But some may be of greater consequence and you may want to have a lot more input into those. So that would be something I'd want to work with you all and the planning board to try to figure out how we can get those comments as part of the development review committee, that we submit, staff submits those forward. So those are the places where you're specifically called out. And that doesn't mean that there's no other options. It just means that that's what's on the books right now. And I wanted to get a better idea of how you all wanted to engage and what you see as your role and what you think would be important to review as a commission for planning board. So, but before we talk about that, I'll tell you a little bit about how
Can I pause for a
Yep.
second, because Jessica has her hand up, so before we move too far, I just want, if you have a question or a
Thanks,
comment,
Gina.
Jess.
It was a question, sorry, for clarification purposes. Was the first item, the charge, a list of conservation priorities or a map of conservation priorities?
it-
Because it was worded a little, I'm just seeking some clarification around that first charge.
it's a registry that lists the owners of land, and I'll send this to Randy to send you all, because this is directly out of the ordinance. So you can have it, but it's a registry that lists the owners of land in the limited growth or very low density growth areas that are interested in transferring their development rights by selling the dwelling unit credits from their property. So basically, for really simple context, west of the turnpike, limited growth. There's some density, they're interested in selling those development rights to another developer, so it's a list of land,
So, and Pete shared in the last meeting that the Conservation Commission did some work several years ago, kind of pulling together potential properties who may be interested in the development transfer program.
Okay.
And the commission did send out a mailing with some information about that. I don't believe anyone responded back with any interest.
Okay.
But you said that was about 10 years ago, right, Pete?
Yeah, 10 or 12 years ago is my 10. Well, yeah, 10 years ago is probably my guess. Maybe even more, where it's 2023 now. It could have been 2010. And so I don't know if I know one of the action items was to kind of see if that list existed still back from the GIS analysis that Jay and whoever was at GIS did for that. Because that was basically what derived the mailing list, was looking for parcels over, I think it was 10 or 15 acres in size that were in the sending area. And that's what the targeted mailing went to. And the brochure is no longer on our website. It used to be. I'm not sure where it is, but there's a copy of the brochure somewhere in digital format. It was a PDF.
Is that brochure, would it be current if all we did was post it? Do you?
I would think it kind of would be current. It was just information on what TDR is and who potentially to contact. That's it. It was just a general brochure. It was not anything that would be specific unless our transfer of development rights program has changed, which I don't think because it's not used very heavily.
B was just. We had gone through something several, like 3 years ago, I want to say, where we put and maybe I'm thinking of something related but different. Where maybe it's in Luffy. We had done updated on development right in Luffy or environmental in Luffy to align with an affordable housing in Luffy.
There is an in Lucy for affordable. housing.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're.
That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry.
And
Carry on.
that brochure is ideally, I mean, it would be on the Conservation Commission's page, which would be a great place to have it, but ideally it'd be somewhere where somebody be looking for planning applications.
Planning
Yeah,
applications too, yeah, in both spots for sure. Yeah, I'm interested. I'll dig around some more.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
See if we can find that page.
Pete, you sent it to me not that long ago, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I found it. It's from an October email. I'll just send it again. It'll be easier.
I think I put it in the Google Drive that everybody here has access to.
You probably did, but just in case, I'll send it again.
some of this is good, just piecing things together.
Mhm,
Yep.
mhm.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
And so I wanted to go over the development process just a bit for some background, especially for somebody that may be newer to the commission. So the planning board is really the group that approves 90% of the development things that come in. So the majority of their function is to review site plans and subdivision ordinances. And so subdivision can be as simple as one lot line, basic subdivision for a single family home, or it could be 50 lots, or it could be 10 commercial lots. So they see a lot of those, but that would be, you would get easements and right of way for future streets. There would be wetland delineation if it exists. You would really see a lot of information about the property at the subdivision phase. And then the site plan phase is where you get more specific about the building that's going to go on. So residential, single family residential is not required to go through the site plan phase. So it would be, but multifamily is. So multifamily, commercial, institutional, that sort of thing. That will go through the site plan phase. And that's where the planning board is looking at traffic impact, they're looking at architecture, landscaping, sidewalks, everything.
It's covered with the cost.
Correct, they did a subdivision of the land and then a site plan review as well. So the subdivision is just land, the box. And the site plan includes the land and the vertical on the land. So they are the approving body for that. So those submittals go through our department, planning department, and then we funnel those out to all of the appropriate reviewers and third-party reviewers, and then funnel those back into the planning board and they make a decision. So town council doesn't see those. They don't, they can see them, but they don't go before them for approval. So I just wanted Joel to have a little background on that. So it's really that planning board process that you want to get involved with. And in front of. We also do some other things, sketch plans and things of that nature, but the majority of our work are site plan reviews and subdivision reviews for planning board. And so I guess, you guys jump in. I know that I've been doing these meetings with a lot of the different groups, and a lot of the different groups have expressed that they have some goals, and we have some goals from the comp plan, some goals and some tasks, but we don't necessarily have the ordinances in place to make the goals a reality, right? So we have some great ideas, but we don't have the words to make that happen. And so that's one part of it. And then it looks like we need to figure out a process for the small pieces that we do have in place to make that happen too. So And then if there are other places or other opportunities that you all would like to see, let me know, and then I can see what I can do to make that happen as well.
Yeah, I think it's been an ongoing piece for us that we want to be able to start taking some sort of action currently while on a parallel track, we're working towards
Mhm.
ordinance development or changes, and certainly now we know long-range planning committee is there to help us develop some of these ordinances. And while there are current guidelines and processes that have the planning board do their checks relevant to conservation issues with state and other bodies. Ideally, a really positive first step, several steps, is developing an ongoing communication with the planning board and, having the ability to tap the expertise and the knowledge on this commission when these questions come up to help guide early on, because the early decisions before they come into sort of formal planning process can make significant difference for conservation of land, contiguous land, for example, where we've seen, and it doesn't necessarily need to fit into specific like a conservation subdivision ruling, but decisions that a developer can make that don't necessarily cost them money to change or limit the development that they're going to do, but have big difference for natural habitat and land protection. So I think that ongoing relationship is important, and this is a huge first part of the first steps, is having you talk with us about that. So happy to open it up to folks, what's on your mind as you're hearing this and what you're interested in sort of what kind of direction you're going in. Some of this came from our thoughts on the conservation guidelines that were accompanied with the GMO update, where we are wanting to offer ourselves to conduct research in conjunction with the planning board on land usage and make recommendations to preserve and enhance the natural resources of the town. We'd really appreciate if the planning board invites and considers comments from this commission as to the impact on wetlands, shoreland, floodplains, natural areas, and other pertinent environmental matters, and that we're engaged to perform monitoring services and help coordinate activities with other conservation bodies that have similar purposes. So those are the sort of where it starts, but also involve us early in the planning the planning process. So some of this we put in context, but again, I'd love to open it up for other thoughts or reflections from folks.
Pete has his hand
Great.
raised.
Go back to that, the Zoom.
Yep. Just a minute, Pete.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, to speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, you can go. We just couldn't see you on the screen.
Oh, sorry. I think I think our conservation guidelines are really good. Basically, what they are, guideline approaches for what our goals would be in relation to looking at some of this stuff. The one question that I kind of had, I guess, for the group and also for Autumn is are our ordinances and all of the things that we're looking at, do they look at cumulative impact of development, et cetera, throughout the entire town over time? Or does it look at each project on a case-by-case basis in terms of the impact of that project? And that's one thing, anyway, so that's a thought, and then it's a thought that I think that we as a commission should consider in terms of kind of the way we look at things. We should be looking at things more holistically in terms of impact to the town and the conservation principles in the town should be more holistic as opposed to a project by project or case by case basis.
And so Pete, I would say that the planning board, the site plan and the subdivision, it's very project by project. It's applicant by applicant. The comp plan attempts to look at it more holistically in the mapping and the task. But again, the comp plan is really broad reaching. So it's really the different commissions and committees and boards that get more in the weeds, if you will, about the specifics of the comp plan. So no, we don't,
Okay.
unless we're moving towards that, but we don't have that in place now. I know like Parks is moving towards a Parks master plan where we can start to say with the project, this is achieving XYZ of this Parks master plan. We're also about to undertake a transportation plan. And once we have that, we can say this achieves XYZ of this. And so we're getting there, but we don't have it quite yet.
Okay. And I guess, I mean, conservation should fall under that holistic approach as well, I guess is what I'm getting at. So thanks.
Is there a town view or your department's view of what you're looking for in planning? Sort of whoever comes with an application, that's what we get.
So the way it works is anybody can submit anything. And so the first step is to make sure the zoning is appropriate,
Right.
right? They can do that use, then they can submit. And we don't really get to have a lot of input on if we like it or not, if it meets our ordinances, right? So our ordinances are our rules. There's a few subjective moments and some waivers in there for planning board. But for the most part, that's why it's really important that the books are good, because the books dictate what the results are, right? So if the books aren't good, the results aren't good,
Mhm.
unless we get lucky. And that can happen sometimes, but it's the words that are written is really where your power is. We don't get to have, I can sway, I can try, and I do, and we will, but when it really, push comes to shove, they're like, show me where it says that. Well,
Yeah.
it's one of those, you
Yeah.
try to get the best, but
So we've got the rules and the ordinances, we've
rules.
got the goals sort of in a comprehensive
Mhm.
plan, but the vision for the town is really what we get between these two.
yeah, so the comp plan is that vision, and it says
Yeah.
a lot of different things,
Right.
right? It could, everyone could probably read the comp plan and come up with a different vision of that. And then we have these implementation tasks that are more specific. And I'm working with the long range planning committee, and just one goal that says, and one task that says, encourage attractive mixed use centers that make people want to live here.
Right. What does attractive mean? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we went through it. That means I need to change about 12 ordinances to get
Yeah.
there, right? That is 12 different things. And the same thing for you all. You have an implementation list, but each one of those high level sentences is probably 4 or 5 things that need
Mhm.
to get done.
Mhm.
But yeah, that the comp plan is the high level and the goal, but then we also are looking to get guidance from town council. And so for them to bring that down, and I think we are getting to that point too, so we can get a focus. Is our focus in town, affordable housing? Is our number one focus conservation, or is it 50-50? I think we're all sort of looking for that as well. I've asked that question. So when I come to these meetings, we're all working towards a common goal. And ultimately the goal is to make the town of Scarborough what everyone wants it to be. And not work in silos. So you
Right.
all to be working on something that seems really great here, but totally conflicts with
Yeah, right.
Parks Advisory, is
Yeah.
working on, because it's in direct. We want to be working towards the same thing
Absolutely.
and helping each other. So a good example, Jamie and I were speaking earlier, so long range planning committee is working, we started with architectural standards for design standards. But then I was like, ooh, do we have any arborists anywhere? Because we're gonna need to do landscaping too, that'd be great to break that out of long range planning where I don't have any arborists, I don't have anyone in that field. And that piece could go to another group, and then we could feed it all into this site plan ordinance, and you all could be responsible for a section of that as well. So I'm trying to figure out how to use all the different committees to implement the comp plan for some other areas. Because if we go through, and Marvin's on that committee, he could attest, if we go through every single task, we'll be there for probably 3 years. I think we want to get there faster.
Marvin,
Long-range planning is also in the eye of the beholder.
mhm.
Sometimes long-range means, are we going to have a one-way or a two-way street, which doesn't sound very long-range to me. And if you talk in terms of what is common today, commonly understood, such as sea level rise, you're viewing 50, 100 years. I'm not going to be around just to put it on the table, but still is, to my way of thinking and understanding, that's long range.
right,
So I mean, I think that in long range planning committee, we're not, I don't need to speak outside of the committee, but something that's on my mind immediately is, what does long range mean?
mhm,
Coming to some understanding among the committee members on that very simple idea. And the gentleman on the screen, his question about cumulative impact versus case by case, I think, I'll stop. I think the town, generally speaking, from a long range planning point of view, is dealing case by case.
mhm.
And the one goal would be, let's begin to have a plan that is actually long range and without casting any aspersion.
Great, thank you. Pete, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of this from the standpoint of the way our discussion's going of, I know there are different, and I don't know if the town has ever run it, but there are different build out models that show how your town's going to look in 15 years, in 20 years, 25 years, based on your current growth patterns, based on your ordinances, based on your zoning, and based on your conservation priorities and the way that works. Has the town ever actually run that analysis to look at, in set timeframes, to look at what Scarborough is going to look like in 2050 based on our current development patterns and the way that our comprehensive plan is structured and the way our zoning ordinances and our zoning in general is structured? And could that be a catalyst for helping guide this discussion in terms of, well, here's what it might look like if we've run this software. I know it's out there. I don't remember the name of it. And is that what we want our town to look like in the future? And this gets at your discussion, Marvin, of what long range actually means. You know, is it 30 years from now is the life of the mortgage? Is it 15 years from now like the life of a comp plan? Or is it beyond that? Just so a couple questions and a thought in there.
So we don't have any software. We do have some data that we've actually, that's something I'm trying to get a handle on with what we have for GIS. And we've been talking about with our GMO discussion. And that's a big thing about the GMO discussion is limiting that growth. So that's a really powerful tool that we have. I mean, I have a couple different magic numbers in my head that I know what they are. It's not for public consumption, you know, but I know based on our zoning. So a large percentage of the town is rural farming. And so huge potential for build out if you didn't have the GMO in place, right? Everybody thinks about the GMO in the downs. The GMO is protecting west of the turnpike. It's doing like downs, you know, is great and it's on its own, but the GMO is doing an excellent job of protecting your farmland and your rural assets. And it's really important there. It's less important probably in your growth areas. I think that's just, it's speed, but those are some big impact areas. But we don't have the long answer, sorry. We think about it. I'm thinking about it. And I'm getting to a point where we can have it with some GIS data, but we have a good idea of where we are.
If we can sort of zipper that up with what is the pace at which we need and how would it work for us to protect 30% of our land in Scarborough in conservation. How do these two sort of zipper up? That would be pretty critical to.
And I think so. I think once the GMO discussion is finalized, April, May, we'll have a better understanding of where the town's goals are. But I think that is critical to what you need. But I think in the meantime, you can still sort of march on under that understanding. I don't think anybody's gonna say, oh, let's have 2,000 building permits a year. I don't think we're there. There's not gonna be a huge shift in that thought that we wanna just open up all of the permits. So I think you're safe in that assumption. I think the numbers are here or here, you know, it's not here or here. So I think you're still okay with that.
I guess in follow-up to this discussion, I would advocate that we look at some kind of methodology or process of engaging at some point in using that kind of software to kind of help plan some of the long-term, long-range growth of the town based on build-out scenarios. I mean, it's one thing to drive down a road and have a narrow 25 or 50-foot buffer. When you're driving down the road, you're like, oh, it's all wooded in this area. But when you zoom out or fly a drone or fly in an airplane over the town, all you see is segmented development and things like that. And I'm not saying everywhere, but that's the vision that you get with this kind of software that shows what a town is going to look like from the air in the future. So anyway, it might be something that we might want to consider looking into. And I don't know how that works, who does it, but it might help guide some of the discussions we're talking about.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good, it seems like a really good thing for the Conservation Commission to ask of the town. Thank you, Pete. And it would help guide a lot of people's thinking and review of what's happening in the town and where we need to place our focus. Other thoughts for this discussion, Jessica?
I would advocate if this does happen, that we also would project some different ordinance scenarios. So this is not one of them, but riparian corridor protection. What happens if we go from, and I'm making all of this up, 100 to 200 feet? What does that do? What are our priorities as a commission, and what does that mean for the build out scenarios for our community? So not just like, this is what will look like if everything bad happened, but also this is what it could look like if we implemented these ordinances and protected our resources, the community that we want it to look like.
Nice.
Which I think could help to support those ordinances.
Do you all, how do you envision being engaged with the planning department if I get a new submittal? Today was the submittal day, January 9th. And say it was a plan development. I mean, how do you envision reviewing that as a group and the practicality of that? Like, how can we get there? Like, first and foremost, let's figure out how to do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Sort of like the mechanics. of the
Yeah,
process.
just how that works.
I don't know, Pete, have you seen this work before? How did it work? What are some of the lessons that you have for us?
Well, in the past, it was very, very limited. It was only at the discretion of the planning board when the planning board wanted to ask us something. And usually it was something that would come up if it was a very, very large project that would draw a lot of people in opposite directions potentially. We were asked to look at and comment on those things, and typically what it would be is we would try to look at it from a conservation standpoint of, are the land uses adjacent to, a lot of this relates to our ordinances, but are the land uses adjacent to say the Scarborough Marsh or the tributary of the Scarborough River, are the buffers adequate? The way that the access to the property, is it done in a way that minimizes impact to wetlands? And so it's been based on kind of those kind of comments in kind of looking at plans and keep providing feedback then in a memo to the planning board, is the way it was done in the past. And again, we haven't been asked in quite a long time to take a look at that. So it was very hit or miss. We've only looked at maybe 6 or 8 things over the time I've been involved in the Conservation Commission, which is in since 2007. So it's been very, very limited in the past, but in general, it's been at the discretion of the planning board, and it was very focused, hyper focused on, are the buffers appropriate? Are there ways that the developer could have considered something different in terms of minimizing impacts to the resources? Are all the resources that need to be on the map that are related to the plan? So this relates a little bit also to our conservation guidelines that we talked about in terms of using beginning with habitat maps, which weren't really around, at least in the format they are in now. Back then, they were just in paper copies. They weren't even available really online.
So if that were to happen, start happening again now, today was the submittal date. In a couple days, what I'm looking at is the schedule of when things for planning of initial submittals. So today was the submittal date, a couple days, then it gets distributed for peer review. Then there's, 2 weeks to then review and submit comments back. So I think the question is that we're contemplating is, do we see ourselves as having a role to play and be able to respond in a couple of weeks, which is in between commission meeting times? So if like in a couple of days we get something, could we as a commission review, provide comments and submit back in a couple of weeks?
Do we have guidelines about review? I mean,
No, this is kind of like.
this
what
is
we're
all new?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, and that would be part of it too. The way we work in planning is we have sort of a template. Like for site plan review, and it has the master list of the 150 things we check, right? And so then it makes it easier because you don't have to go back and reread the ordinance every time. You get a new submittal and not applicable, yes, ooh, no, yes. And so that would be something I would be happy to work with you guys on, to create that template of review comments. So you're not recreating the wheel every time. And so,
Which we
Like-
could just apply conservation principles to that and have it an easy
have like a
check. and
checklist,
Yeah,
and then it could be maybe. I mean, I don't know, maybe one of you could be assigned to do it each month or something to that effect, where you sort of share in it, but it would have to be something off meeting time. And it wouldn't be every time, but it would be, say I've got a project that came in and you all would get it on January 11th, and I need your comments or your checklist by January 24th. And then the planning board meeting is January 30th.
Yeah, I think that was part of the problem. We would get a plan, and then we would not really be able to formulate cogent comments until we met again. So it was usually 2 meetings for the planning board, at least, before they'd get our comments back. So we'd have to develop some kind of methodology to streamline that or make it a lot easier, because it rarely worked out that we were able to actually all get together and because of course we didn't have the online tools we really do now. So that's also.
Right.
so I'm seeing Karen and then Jessica. I think that's the order in which you all raise your hand.
Sure. I don't want to cloud the conversation, but you're all talking around one of my goals for this committee, kind of. So I just wanted to chime in real quick. I think it would be helpful if you guys identified what on the lots would trigger you to want to be part of the planning process. So I think Pete just listed off certain things that sometimes they would come to you for advice for. I think Randy and I had spoken in the past about a checklist. I mean, my understanding with my year on the planning board was it's a checklist, and why can't we just add to the checklist, oh, do you fall under this conservation checklist? And if you do, then we need a memo from the conservation board. My question that I have for Autumn and everyone is, can we delay the site plan process if we do not have a memo and opinion from the conservation, if we feel it's important to get?
If they submit a complete submittal, then we technically have to move them forward the way it's written now. I don't think that we have enough time to review things the way it is. It's a really fast 3-week process. What ends up happening is bigger projects usually go to planning board twice, at least 2 times. But yeah, technically, if you get a complete submittal in, we take you forward to planning board on the calendar. And so that we can't delay it. Unless they're missing a piece or something to that effect. That's why I was trying to figure out, given what we have right now to work with, is there a way that you can have this a detailed, like to Karen's point, a very detailed list that says, we want to review these, okay, and we're gonna review these 8 things. And maybe then that triggers some additional discussion at planning board. That might be a medium or middle ground sort of fix until, because the whole process of the meetings and everything may end up changing over time. But that's kind of the world we live in right now, this weird gap.
Karen, did you have a follow-up? See Marvin. Okay, Jessica, and then Marvin has a comment.
My
Okay.
question is related to this checklist. So does the applicant run through, excuse me, some GIS? Like, for example, does the town or the applicant go through and, for example, use the beginning of habitat maps and see if there's any important habitat on the parcel? Or is that something we could automate? So by that I mean, could we identify some priorities, riparian corridors, wetlands, habitat, natural areas that someone then does the GIS overlay, and then if it's present in the parcel, then it kicks up to the group, not like, does the parcel have wetlands? Yes, no, but actually seeing what's there on GIS, and then whose responsibility is that currently, if it's done at all.
The submittal engineers are responsible for that. I mean, we have resource protection zones, and I don't know if you've looked at our online GIS mapping, but we have shoreland, and we have resource protection, and we have floodplain, and we have all those things identified. And then when we get the submittals, typically on a subdivision plat, those things are called out. And so it's not we don't have to go, the work's done. The submittal engineers have responsibilities to check those things as well. And then we double check, but it's not really an issue that we have. Maybe I don't understand the question, but we have those resources there.
That's a baseline.
Yeah.
That is part of the submittal.
Right.
And then that would flag
Right.
sort of higher attention from the Conservation Commission, right? Pete, you had something else?
And then I didn't know if there were additional maps that we as a commission or layers that we as a commission would want to add to that. Just generally speaking, and whether or not that would then kick it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to give an example of something that would of how this has worked, at least. So a plan would come in, and the developer meets the zoning requirements, or whatever they are, the setback requirements, and they have a 25-foot buffer, because that's the minimum, away from, say, a tributary to the Scarborough River. Yet they have lawn up to that 25-foot buffer. So what we as a Conservation Commission could do, again, everything we do is simply a recommendation to the planning board. We don't have any regulatory teeth at all. So what we would recommend in that case is, well, they easily have room to shift some of their houses based on the site plan to increase that buffer to a larger number, knowing it's an important tributary to the Scarborough River, and give some reasoning for that. Therefore, we can make a recommendation to the planning board that they can't necessarily do it, but they can talk to the developer about potentially doing it, because the planning board basically looks at, does it meet this requirement or does it not? And if it does, they have to approve it. But they can at least say or provide additional recommendations based on what the Conservation Commission says. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit of the process of how I'm envisioning this working and how it has worked in the past where developers actually come back and say, okay, all right, well, we'll increase the buffers in this area and shift a couple of the houses around over here. We don't have to, but we're going to because that's the responsible conservation-minded thing to do. Because not all of our ordinances have conservation totally in mind. They have
Right.
minimum standards, and some of those minimum standards, if they're met, it's a blanket approach, and it doesn't necessarily apply to all scenarios that's the actual right. For instance, I'm just using setbacks as an example, but that's actually the adequate setback for the development in a certain scenario.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Marvin, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna thank Pete for that, because that was very helpful to me. Not, just trying to understand all this.
Thank you.
I'd love to add something, and it's the idea that the way things have been, I was a part of the writing of the comprehensive plan. And admittedly, I came in somewhat late, but still was around when it was presented to the council. Still hasn't been finalized by the state. The last comp plan in 2006, as I'm sure you know, if I have that date right, was extraordinarily prescriptive. Extraordinarily prescriptive. And as a result, since 2006, you have what Pete's been talking about, the way things have been. And everything has been extremely prescriptive, which leads directly to the planning board taking front seat initiative. What we say goes, and I realize this is baked into the ordinance and the charter. However, it took me it's taken me 2 years to understand that the new comprehensive plan, which is entirely not prescriptive. And as Autumn said, all of us can read it and come up with a difference. Very novelistic and by design. And I thought, oh my God, because I'm somewhat on the side of responsible development, not just wholesale development. I was like, oh gosh, this is a free-for-all for the developers. They can read into it anything they want and apply it. Well, it's also a free-for-all for the conservation side of things. And upon its enactment, and even now, I think you can completely not rewrite, but rethink the way the process that you're describing is going to work. And I would certainly, from my point of view, would encourage that. The Conservation Commission, in my opinion, based on the comprehensive plan, could be the governing entity to which the planning board appeals. For instance, I'm not way out of my lane, but I don't see that as not being, depending on the initiative you want to take, how much work you want to do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's really what you're talking about, not how many maps per se, although a great idea to need to be seen, or what even the schedule is. So let's rewrite the schedule.
Right.
I mean,
Thank you, Marvin. So a couple things. One, I have some thoughts, but I also am looking at time, and I think let's give this another 5 to 7 minutes of discussion before we move on to other things that we want to get to on the agenda. Any other sort of questions or clarification or comments? So what I'm thinking about right now is that we have this schedule. We have these ordinances that are in place right now. I'd like to encourage us to try to work with what we have, see what that's like, come back as a commission and discuss what that was like for us, and how we want to be able to adjust, and how the other additional comments that we want to give to staff, the planning board, and the council for ways that we can see conservation and climate resilience really being put forward for the town. So, in other words, let's see what comes across to us on the 11th of January or thereabouts. Let's discuss, let's commit as a commission for those next couple of weeks to be on the lookout and contribute our thoughts. And then come back to each other to check in and say, how did that go? What do we want to adjust? Are we ready for something like this on a regular basis? And how do we want to provide additional comments on the process to the planning department? Does that sound like a good, like, could everybody be on board with that for right now? Well, yeah.
Could we consider the guidelines that we all worked on as a frame for the
Yeah,
GMO as a framework for the way that we use the wrong word, but look at these applications? Because I think we've coalesced around what we feel is important. And so if it's applicable, consistent with the guidelines.
thank you. And if there's a way that we can frame the guidelines into a checklist type,
Yeah.
really be helpful.
Gotta love a checklist.
Yes. Yeah, it makes it more straightforward for everyone. So let's try that out.
Okay.
And then just keep talking about it. It's great.
Yeah, and maybe, you might not get anything, I don't know what we got submitted today. You might not get anything that necessarily, but it might be a good trial run, right?
Yeah.
See how it goes and see like, oh, how can we do this? Yeah, sounds good. We're also, the way you'll get the information now, will be like in Drive links. And we're working on getting some new software so we can break things up a little better,
Okay.
Because it's pretty ugly right now. It gets lengthy, but so we'll try to, that'll get better too.
That's great. Is that software also related to how the public can access it?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Fewer downloading PDFs.
Yeah,
on our
everything is
website.
all together and
Yeah.
it's huge. I can't open them and yeah, we're getting there. It's dead.
Other comments for Autumn tonight? Thanks so much. This is
Sure.
this is big. We really appreciate this.
Can I stay
Thanks, Autumn.
instead of going? to
Absolutely.
planning?
Oh, yeah. please do. We're waiting for fun.
Thanks.
Thank you, Autumn.
Thank you.
Thanks all. All right, so next is checking in with our subcommittees. And we don't have any updates from building resiliency, but we do from our promoting engaged citizen stewardship group. And maybe I'll turn this over to Marla. Would you take the lead on this, Marla?
Sure. And I'm just going to mention that I'm not alone. So our 8-year-old is here with me tonight. So if you hear some laughing or talking, that's him. So I thank you, Randy. And I will say that was a very interesting discussion. So it's great to have the planning board represented here. So we had an education subcommittee meeting last Wednesday, and Randy and I were able to attend, as well as Andrew Mackey, who's there with you, and Scott Kunkler, the SLT conservation director. And we wanted to start a conversation about some potential educational outreach events for 2023. And our subcommittee is getting really excited to work on some events with other groups in our town, and really to meet the goal of promoting engaged citizen stewardship. So the first thing we discussed was Sustainable Scarborough Day, and that and Jamie you can you can chime in here, because I believe this idea was from the Sustainability Committee, but we're, as a Conservation Commission, we're interested and we want to be involved with this. And so we discussed it with the Scarborough Land Trust, and they seem to be interested as well. And I think there's a lot of potential. This could be an annual event, and I think it could be fun and get lots of citizens out talking about sustainability issues and challenges and solutions and ideas. And this would be a great way to network with other groups and of course, reach out to the public and hopefully, make some sort of difference. So Jamie, I don't know if you could tell me more about what the Sustainability Committee has done on this event.
So the committee's in a little bit of a holding pattern. I gave a very brief update at our last meeting. The Sustainability Committee did not meet in December because the meeting date conflicted with the holidays. So we'll meet again actually earlier in January than we typically do. They're meeting next week on the 18th. And a lot of this kind of came about because they wanted to kind of talk about opportunities for electrification. So talking about heat pumps and electric vehicles and things like that. And then it just kind of expanded to other areas of conservation and sustainability. A lot of it was kind of the impetus was the Inflation Reduction Act, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities and tax breaks and incentives for various upgrades through that new legislation. We're waiting for guidance to come out. The federal government, to my knowledge, has yet to release guidance on really how the programs are going to work. So we are hoping to have an update in January from Efficiency Maine, because they are digging into kind of the legislation and the requirements and awaiting the guidance from the federal government on that. So the hope was that we would have some information this month so that we can set a date and plan for Sustainable Scarborough Day. We're waiting until we have that information because we feel like that's really that's what the Sustainability Committee would like the focus to be. There's so many other topics that we can include as well, but since that was kind of the catalyst for this, we feel it's really important to have that information, and rather than setting a date and then having to change it if we don't have the information, because we know how forthcoming the federal government is with a lot of these new programs. We are taking it slow at this point. So I will hopefully have an update next week in terms of where things stand with the guidance and how people will be able to access all of these new programs that are supposed to be coming. But at this point, that's as much of an update as I have for you, unfortunately. The goal was to have the day right around Earth Day. If it has to be moved out a couple months, I don't think that is that big of a deal, because I know that there are already a lot of community events that happen around Earth Day anyway. So maybe while it would be great to kind of coordinate and have everything under one umbrella, if it doesn't happen this year because of delays with the information from the Inflation Reduction Act, then it doesn't mean the event won't happen. It just means it's not necessarily going to happen around Earth Day. So I'm sorry, my update is kind of a non-update at this point.
Okay, well, that's actually a lot of really helpful information. And of course, the Conservation Commission would be interested in being involved in whatever way we could to promote it and support it and to be there. So I guess we'll wait for more information about that.
On the list. You guys were top on the list when we were talking about other groups to involve. So it was Conservation Commission.
That's great.
Obviously, the other environmental groups in the area, Project Grace is super excited. So there's a large list, and part of the first steps will be kind of getting folks together who are interested in participating so that it's more of a collaborative effort as opposed to one group being the coordinator. It's going to take a village for this one.
Great. And we would love to be involved. So yeah, definitely let us know, as soon as we can be involved with, and maybe we create a little ad hoc committee to make this happen. But I think that'll be great. So, okay, so wait to get more information about that. And in the meantime, we're also looking to host a number of events. I mean, our hope is to do 4 this year. I mean, I personally think if we could even do 2, that would be great. But let's shoot for 4. And Rita came up with this idea. I think we've mentioned this in previous meetings about why Scarborough Marsh matters in a changing climate, protecting upland forests in a changing climate, why Scarborough's 5 rivers matter in a changing climate, and protecting connected habitat in a changing climate. So we're really looking at land conservation and climate issues at the same time. So one of the things that I would like is to actually hear from the Conservation Commission and staff and other groups as well, so that we could come up with a list of potential speakers. And so if you've got any ideas of who you'd like to come to Scarborough and speak, and we're even discussing a potential honorarium that would pay for somebody to come and speak, please email me or Rita, and just send us their information, send us your ideas, anybody, because it would be great. So I know many of you have connections to other folks, and honestly, if any of you want to do a presentation, that'd be great too. Maybe we could even come up with a panel for one of these events. So anyway, yeah, we're working, and we're going to keep meeting in between our full Conservation Commission meetings to work on this. And as soon as we get information about speakers and dates and times, we'll definitely let everybody know. So anyway, it was a very productive meeting with the Scarborough Land Trust. We're excited to work with them and collaborate with them, and we want to work with other groups like the Friends of Scarborough Marsh and the Scarborough Historical Society and the Scarborough Public Library and Project Grace. So all those folks, it'd be really great to work with them, network, collaborate, and create some great programs for 2023. All right. Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Marla. And thank you, Rita.
Can I just ask, just the full group, get your opinion on, I had someone from Piper Shores reach out asking if the town was going to do anything around No Mow May. So, last year there was a big initiative where where nationwide people stopped mowing their lawns in May to promote pollinator habitat during kind of that critical period before there's a whole lot of flowers in bloom for pollinators that need flowers for and nectar and all of that. So is that something that this group would be interested in promoting? No Mow May? I think it might be very contrary to what a lot of people
love
in
to do that.
I figured you would.
And I would love it. And I would be very excited. We do it, much to our neighbors' upsetness. But it's really, really important to keep the dandelions in your yard during May for the bees and the pollinators. And it's not that difficult to just not mow. My husband loves not mowing for him. So I think we should. And we have a cute little sign and it says, No Mow May. It has a bee on it. You put it in your yard and then everybody knows why you're not mowing.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we should.
So I think that there would need to be I know there was a lot of posting on social media last year, not necessarily from Scarborough, but nationwide, that was pretty visible.
Falmouth did it and it was a big deal in Falmouth.
So I think that if Falmouth can do it, Scarborough can do it.
Totally.
So having some education and messaging around that to promote it and get folks on board and planning to participate or not participate or participate by not doing anything would be awesome.
That's fun. Here's how you can participate. Nothing. Leave it alone.
If we, I don't know, we can talk about it at the education subcommittee, but if we are interested, I could see about getting signs so that we could offer them out.
Fantastic. Looks like a lot of nodding heads, and Jessica has a question.
It's a different topic. I just saw them making the case for conservation was one of the areas that folks identified as a potential presentation. I want to throw my hat in the ring. So I have done the economic benefits of land conservation and parks for the Maine Conservation Commission keynote speaker. I think, Randy, was that 2 years ago?
Yeah.
It's been a while. So I presented to all conservation commissions in Maine, and I recently put together a toolkit for the Massachusetts Land Trust Coalition, which included not only a report, but a presentation. So happy to do that. If you think that that would be helpful, I'd probably tweak it a little bit depending on who the target audience is. You know, I typically do presentations for either the land trust community or elected officials, but happy to tailor it for landowners, because it does sound like there might be an opportunity also of why landowners might want to consider conserving their lands.
Thank you, Jessica, and I think it would be really valuable for especially the town council to hear. Maybe there's some way to have a presentation for town council, at which we invite landowners, maybe members of the planning board, others who can listen to this case. So a case for conservation. Thanks, Jessica.
Maybe a Counselor Corner Live, if we can get counselors to participate in that as well.
Yeah, some hybrid of that or a presentation to the town council at one of their meetings. I don't know. We can figure that out. But you know, something for folks to really listen to what the economic benefits are of conservation. Pete, you also had your hand up.
Yeah, just two quick thoughts. One, going back to Nomo May, which I had not heard of before, but that I like it a lot. Francis, that might be a good opportunity to partner with Friends of Scarborough Marsh. We've been at FOSSUM, we've been trying to come up with a marsh friendly designation, which is if your yard is marsh friendly, you know, you're not using pesticides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not saying that's necessarily what we need to do for Nomo May, but it might be an effort that we might want to approach them about in terms of coming up with something. Because again, we've been thinking about a marsh-friendly designation for yards and the way people manage their yards. And then I'm always available as a resource if people want to hear about sea level rise and what might be happening associated with that. So to talk to whomever, homeowner association, town council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Nice, thank you, Pete. All right, so it sounds like we've got a thing that we're moving towards May. So thank you for that energy on that, and lots of great ways to, I guess, engage folks in Scarborough. I'm ready to move to the next item, which is commission membership. I did at the beginning review some changes in our members and the positions. With Noah's resignation, we do have a vacancy. So we will go through that process of the appointments committee taking a look. Sorry, Rita?
Sure, I just wanted to add to possible presentations and so forth that we take Noah's suggestion to heart in terms of really trying to incorporate as much as possible explanations of 30 by 30 as we plan these events and these presentations over the next 6 months or so.
Great, thank you. And thanks for your intention to bring the thoughts and ideas of the members into these sessions. You've already done that with Chuck's focus on climate and now Noah's focus on 30 by 30. We've got a lot of energy behind that.
Great.
And then we also wanted to elect a vice chair. We tried this last year. We've teed it up at the end of 2022, and tonight's the night that we're going to have a vice chair is my hope. Do we have any nominations or self-nominations?
I'm willing to throw my hat in the ring and work with everyone to figure out what it means to be a vice chair. Because I asked last time, I was like, whatever you want it to be.
Well,
That's true. You're
Jessica,
setting precedent. You'd be setting precedent, Jessica.
Jessica, if you had not volunteered, I was going to volunteer you. So thank you.
Oh,
It would have been better to be volunteer.
Well, then I volunteer.
That's excellent. We'll say it's nominated by Rita, Jessica as vice chair. Shall we take a vote?
I'll second that.
Oh, great. Thank
I would,
you.
I third that.
Or do we have other nominations?
Yeah, any other nominations? All right, so I will take Rita's nomination as a motion and Pete as a second, and so we can do roll call. Randy,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Rita,
Yes.
Jessica.
Yeah, yes.
Marla,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
yay, we have a vice chair.
That's fairly painful.
Yeah, right. Well, for you, I'm not sure about how painless it was for Jessica. Thank you
Thank
for
you, Jessica.
volunteering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica.
And now we will figure out what a vice chair is together.
Thank you. Okay, so now it's on to subcommittees. We're just a couple minutes late, but I think we can sort of truncate the updates. We won't have extensive updates. So really our goals continue, conserving land, building resiliency, and the education piece that we talked about. But we need to sort of like double down on doing some of this work in this coming year because of the attention, the opportunities that we have that we've all discussed. So what I'd like to sort of hear tonight is confirmation from each of us around what committees, subcommittees we want to serve on. And if there's anyone who would like to take a lead in saying, yeah, I'll schedule the meeting in between. So using education subcommittee as an example, it really seems to me that Rita takes the lead, but Rita and Marla are sharing leadership. And and Emily's on that committee as well. I, as chair of the commission, can kind of participate when I can. And that's just like a good example for all of us. So we're really looking at conserving lands and building resiliency as our subcommittees. And
Unless
yes.
someone else wants to also join education stewardship.
Yes, they're welcome
Yeah.
to. We have a full committee and you're welcome to do that as well. Thank you.
Could you explain them, like the building? What's the charge for each of them?
The charge is what you want to make of it. It's sort of like the vice chair position, but each of those are our goals, and I need to pull them up really
I'm
quickly.
pulling it up
Thank
and I'll
you.
share it in a sec.
Yeah. So
I mean, is there somebody on building resiliency?
yes, I think Pete is on building resiliency. The focus is around climate resiliency, flooding, sea level rise, clean waters, etc. Conserving land is what it says, which is taking a look at what's available in town. And it is all tied to I'll make sure that you have access to this, Maggie, and walk you through it, but
And
they're
I
all
think
tied to our
Google Drive?
comp plan.
it's in the Google Drive.
Yeah. I
And
think
so
you
Maggie
gave me
has
access.
issued
Yeah.
or has access to that.
Okay. Right, so conserving land, protecting our natural resources, and increasing the amount of continuous green space. We last year we had Noah, Chuck, and Pete.
Well,
on
that one interests me,
Okay, thank you, Maggie.
See if I can edit this.
but Noah and Chuck are gone.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Emily?
Also, I'm thinking maybe I need to adjust my subcommittee. My expertise is in pesticides, pollinators, and that's maybe more the resiliency group. I'm not sure. Maybe you can help me. Where does
Yeah,
that land? I feel like my expertise is less around conservation of land, although I'm really supportive of it. I don't have a lot to contribute other than a warm seat in that area.
Yeah,
But when you talk about no mow May and pesticides and getting rid of that, I'm 120% in, and I can help there.
fantastic. That's great.
So where is that best used? Where is that expertise best used?
So I believe that's in resiliency.
Okay.
We're gonna go down there. Which, you know, Pete developed those resiliency overlay zones, which incorporates pesticide use. But it's also pretty expansive because it's talking about coastal conservation, flooding, and so forth. But I think that sounds fine. If you, that, we'd welcome you on that. And
So, could you just tell me what the committees are now? I don't know what.
that's what they are. There's 3 committees, subcommittees.
What are they?
The first one is conserving land. So it's
Okay.
around, what are the natural resources we want to conserve in Scarborough? Building resiliency is really around our response to really directly climate change and flooding, sea level rise, et cetera. And the third is we're calling the education committee, but it's about this is directly from the comprehensive plan, which is our charge to promote and engage citizen stewardship.
So the conservation, who's heading that, when do they meet?
Conserving land, we're deciding some of that time.
So the education committee is the only one that's been meeting regularly, so this is trying to kind of
So-
get,
So is it proper to take a poll and find out if anybody's interested in serving in the conserving land?
Yes.
Committee?
Yeah, we're doing that right now.
Okay,
What about you, Dick?
yes,
Yes,
that's why I'm asking.
thank you. Thank you. So Dick is up for conserving land. I think we've got everybody in the room tonight. We don't have everybody, we haven't covered everybody on the Zoom.
You can probably remove me from conserving land.
Okay,
My expertise, I mean, I'm really interested, like, kind of like Emily said, I'm really interested in it, but probably other folks should spearhead that. I'm happy to kind of lead the resilience part, knowing that it's not really going to be focused on greenhouse gas mitigation or anything like that. I think that's more for the sustainability committee to kind of look at. And I know Chuck's not with us anymore, and otherwise he probably would want to have that in there. So kind of as it's written is what the interests are, I think, right now. We can probably work on honing in on taking this pretty general concept here and kind of, you know, is it resiliency of the natural infrastructure? Is it resiliency of our built infrastructure? Is the combination of the two? So we'll have to think about how we want to, you know, how we want to focus that. But I'm happy to lead this part still. But
thank you.
hopefully we'll have some folks joining. Sounds like Emily is interested in bringing some stuff as it relates to pollinators and habitat and things like that.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think what the subcommittees can do is really start to hone in, as you're saying, on what it means and what the Conservation Commission broadly can do to advance those goals.
So I don't have any expertise in conserving lands, other than I have an interest in it.
Yeah, you have an interest and a passion, and I think that's what it takes to move forward on things. And, you know, I think you and Dick and anyone else, of course, anyone else is invited to these subcommittee meetings. We'll have some really dynamic conversations about what could be possible for us.
Yeah, we also have to remember that a lot of these are going to cross-pollinate. So
Yeah,
developing a resilience plan is going to have conservation of land in it. So, you know, so they're going to cross-pollinate a lot.
the key is that working groups will help us really take more action and move things forward in a more comprehensive way at the commission level, rather than have these detailed conversations at these meetings. And, you know, our new vice chair will probably also move in and out of some of these committees, but I'm gonna say, Jessica, sounds like you'd be great on conserving land as well, because naturally you're serving on the land board as well. That's your expertise. Can we just throw your name in that?
Yeah, we can definitely throw my name in there. And then Randy, I thought you and I would probably talk about how best to liaise with each of these subcommittees, you know, so if necessary, there might, you know, float around a little bit, or, you know, how to best support each subcommittee. But yeah, my background is in conserving land.
And I just want to mention too, that Autumn and I have been having conversations, and Autumn has shared that she shared this evening that she's going to work, or the council is going to go through a goal setting process, and they're going to review the comp plan and kind of what's been accomplished to date and prioritize what remains. And so that may, or what their priority is for this year. And so that may help feed some of the work for this commission, if we can help the council work towards achieving some of their goals for the year as well.
I love that segue.
I'll stop
To
sharing.
and town council. Karen.
Okay, here we are. I was pulling up my homework from our new chair, John Anderson, who gave me a 2-page layout of my homework before our weekend workshop. April Slyther and I were in charge. Our area is sustainability, conservation, and climate change. And so April and I haven't spoken too much yet, but I think if you guys haven't gotten the point, part of the reason I ran was conservation is a big thing that's important to me. I know one of my goals you guys discussed tonight very thoroughly. It was very exciting to hear you guys talk about that. I really think after spending a year on the planning board, there is no, you know, conversation about conservation. I really think we need to bring you guys into that process. So one of my things is to reach out to my committees and see and talk about goals and things like that. For me, in my mind, that seems like a real attainable goal, is to try to implement some sort of process to get you guys into the site plan process for planning. I think we kind of discussed that again tonight. I would really love to go to this workshop with some hard goals. Randy and I have been emailing and talking, and she sent the spreadsheet. You know, I would love, obviously not tonight, but you know, no pressure, but we are meeting on Saturday. I would love any feedback from any and all of you when you think about how, you know, what town council, what your goals are, what you think our goals would be, how we could attain them. You know, when I circle back around to the planning process, you know, I know other towns do have their conservation commission more in part of the planning process, but I don't know how. I feel like Randy might know a little bit about this, how the other towns are doing it. And so I'm going to do a lot of cramming in the next couple days. But, you know, I'm really hopeful, because I think, you know, conservation is really big. We've been focusing, I think, on the comp plan when it comes to development a lot. And I really think we want to look at the comp plan and really focus on what it says in regards to conservation and how we can really start implementing it, because I don't think it has been. I don't want to take up all your time. I really would love feedback about what your guys' priorities and goals are. I obviously will be talking to Randy a lot in the next couple of days. I believe the workshop is open to the public. So I think people are welcome to come and view it and speak to it, or if there's stuff that you want me to review before I go to it, if it's information that you think might be helpful, I would love it.
Great. And I think everyone can email you, your emails on the website, and either you directly or get in touch with me. And then I would just say broadly, it feels like if we, as a commission, were to say for the town council to have one thought, it would be conserving 30% of our land by 2030. It's something that's been obviously put forward by the federal government, The state government's climate action plan includes that, and that really sort of coalesces a lot of action if that is guiding light. That's one thing that we did not, I don't think is included specifically in our spreadsheet, but something that would be great for the council to have at the forefront of their minds.
And to put that in context, we believe that that's roughly, what remains is roughly 7,000 acres. So looking to conserve 7,000 acres by 2030. So we already have about 15% of Scarborough in conservation, roughly. So we need to conserve an additional 15% by 2030, and that's roughly 7,000 acres.
That was gonna be my question. Have we started on this or is this? Yeah.
Hopefully you guys will
I
have
can-
some guidance.
Oh, yes.
And I just raise a point to that because this has come up a couple times. If you look at Scarborough's conserved lands number, it's a little higher than a bunch of other towns. And a big chunk of that is the fact that we have 3,000 acres of tidal lands that are considered conserved lands. There's a big question of whether you should really count that towards a 30-30 goal. Because, something that gets flooded by a couple feet of water twice a day was not going to be built on and
Right.
developed. And if you really look at the 30-30 plan by the IUCN and internationally, it's a 30% land goal and a 30% ocean goal. So, we really haven't talked about what that means for offshore resources.
So we can say in terms of land, it's a 7,000 to 10,000 acre goal, I would say then. Whether you want to count the marsh or not.
Thank you. There's a planning board update here. I feel like if there's anything new or interesting you want to share.
The down,
Pardon me, sorry, Pete.
I just wanted to jump in before we moved on to planning board. I think, Karen, one thing to also think about is we just had a big coastal event on the day before Christmas Eve. And that was the third or fourth highest water level that's been recorded since 1912 in Portland. And a lot of communities in Scarborough saw humongous amounts of erosion and also damage to a lot of seawalls, some infrastructure, and a bit of coastal flooding. We are lucky we didn't get flooded like some of the communities to the south of us. But I think that it might be important to mention that event and in the context of climate resilience and also resilient infrastructure and resilient natural infrastructure. So just to reiterate some of the ideas, and while it's fresh in people's minds, it might be a good topic to mention.
Right, and key arteries of town were closed due to that, and it certainly cost town resources to respond.
Thanks.
Thanks. Autumn?
oh, I was just gonna mention, the planning board tonight is reviewing a sketch plan for the Downs Town Center.
Okay.
Just the middle there of Market Street, and Scarborough Downs Road. And then, I'll wait for sustainability to tell you about that.
Oh, yeah. That's next. Go ahead.
Go ahead. And then I'll-
And that was so exciting.
fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Did you all catch what she just said?
the EV ordinance, parking ordinance passed.
That's fantastic.
So now developers will be required to at least plan for the installation of EV charging infrastructure in development. So some will have to install chargers, and others will just have to make sure that there's conduit under their parking lot. So when the market dictates that they should, or their customers dictate that they want EV chargers available to them, it'll be easy for them to retrofit.
Super.
Congrats, that's great. Good news.
Thank you.
Other items from sustainability? You mentioned the they're still gonna meet in a week or so.
Yeah, we're meeting, yeah, we haven't met since the commission last met, so we'll meet again next week, so I'll have more of an update for you in February. I don't have a transportation committee update, because again, their meeting was canceled because of their conflict with the holidays. Dick?
Well, on the transportation, do you know if there's anybody in the transportation group who's interested in micro-mobility? Just one person.
In terms of like, e-bikes and things like
Okay, yeah,
that?
it's not roads and it's not trails. It's like the villages taking golf carts. You have a whole separate transportation system. And dedicated to, you don't have to get a license. You can just get in your e-bike or your little e-vehicle that isn't a car. And Scarborough has a really great opportunity to jump on top of it. And I was wondering if there's even one person on the transportation committee is interested in that.
I don't know that that has come up as a topic of, conversation with the transportation committee.
I can ask the
Could
next
you,
week.
yeah.
So I did connect Randy with the chair of the transportation committee, so they will be
Okay.
chatting.
Yeah.
Also.
The transportation committee is going to be going forward with our transportation master plan. And so depending on how much we can spend, the whole trails and connectivity piece may start to come to fruition as well, so.
Great.
And then the parks master plan is getting wrapped up as well, so that has some overlap too.
And the
so.
conserving
Mhm,
lands
mhm.
group.
There was a big article in the Press Herald today about that stuff. I don't know if people saw it, about transportation in Scarborough. I'll post a link in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Autumn, I don't know where this goes, and maybe not here, but my son runs for Scarborough High, and they were recently flagged down because they were running in the middle of the road, which is unsafe because of the, after school now it's dark. And they don't really have good trails to run on, so the entire track team crosses Route 1 to go to the Eastern Trail. Yeah, I'm a mom. It's scary, especially at dark.
Right.
And my son came home and he said, Mom, is there something that we can do about these trails? There's just no connectivity. I said, well, I know that this is, coming forward, but I didn't know if is there a better place for me to share that from a planning perspective? That just the need for our kids to have at a minimum to have connectivity for trails for running for our teams.
I think you could share it to really any department you wanted to at Scarborough. I think we're all working towards that. I think every department, parks, transportation, planning, the land trust, conservation, I think we're all trying to figure out how to get there. And the first thing is to Todd's master plan, Todd Souza, the parks director, community services director. I've asked him to put a map together with all of Andrew's land trust information and all of our information. And so we can have it. And so the vision is, I'm very visual. And so if somebody comes in for development, the idea is to have this set of everything in one place, right? And you can see, okay, this trail's here and this trail's here, and you're here. And so, yeah, you're going to be in the middle and it's going to be long, but the idea is to identify those connections. And so that's where we're going. So I think there's a lot of people working on those things, and we all know.
Okay, good.
Or can I give you my micro-mobility map?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll take all the information I can.
What's next? The
Parks and Conservation Land Board.
So the Parks and Land Conservation Board is meeting tomorrow morning. So it hasn't had a meeting since our last meeting. I'm kind of sick, so I wasn't planning on attending and sharing my germs. So I'll be just waiting for the meeting minutes on that one. Because there's the only option is in person.
Can I share a little update associated with that.
Sure.
Since our current project, 91 Burnham Road, which is approximately 8 acres off of Burnham Road, adjacent to Fuller Farm, received funding, recommendation from the Parks and Conservation Land Board, and then approval from Town Council. We closed on that the last week of December,
Congrats.
so that property is now conserved.
Nice. That's great. Nice. Good work all around. Nice to know town funds are going towards that, all the work that you did to find that and protect it. Congratulations. Hooray for all of us. That's a nice note to leave on. EV ordinance, EV charging ordinance, land protected. All right, look at us. Motion to adjourn?
I'll
Motion to adjourn.
second.
Thank you all. See you in February.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.